Guys, I've been doing this for 10 years. Honestly, I went in there not really being a Steven Bartlett fan, to be honest.
Lottie Whyte is the co-founder and CEO of one of the UK's fastest growing health and wellness brands, MyoMaster. She famously appeared on the BBC's Dragon's Den, where she was hailed as giving one of the most masterful pitches in the Den's history.
There are quicker ways to find out. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Some national newspapers coined you after Dragon's Den as the most impressive contestant that had ever been on
I'll
it.
take, almost this is the like find your heart. But
Yeah.
honestly, 3 years of like pure pain.
MyoMaster and you and your team, you seem to understand the consumer very well.
Like they grilled us consistently for 3 hours. The biggest lesson I've learned about this whole thing and this whole journey is
Today's episode is brought to you by Profile, a PR agency that turns entrepreneurs and CEOs into industry leaders through media coverage, LinkedIn, and video.
LinkedIn, media, and speaking opportunities are often an afterthought, especially for CEOs. They just don't have the time. That's where Profile step in. They take care of everything. They're an end-to-end service, so you can hand over the profile building to them and worry about driving the growth of your business.
So if you've got a story to tell and you want to build a profile as an entrepreneur or industry leader, you can find out more by going to www.welcometoprofile.com.
This is exciting for us. We've been watching your clips on Dragon's Den. We've seen your new products that have been launched recently, and we're excited to understand a bit about MyoMaster and the fabulous journey you're on so far. So typically we like to start by kind of asking, in your own words, kind of, what's the vision? What does MyoMaster deliver to its customers?
oh, what a way to start. Throw me in at the deep end. Why
It's the worst version.
Yeah, it just gets us nice and into it.
So with MyoMaster, we're building the home of human optimization, and we create products and education for people who I would say are a similar age to me in a similar stage of life, which is, you've got children, you are trying to take care of yourself, you're not in your 20s anymore. So, maybe your body isn't working as optimally, maybe you don't have as much time to work out and take care of yourself, but you still want to feel well. And we really started as a sports recovery company, but we've evolved really as our customer has, from maybe being in their 20s and having tons of time to train and work out, and now having families and big jobs, and just really focusing on how can they turn up every day and perform at their best, whether that's being a parent, being at work, being a boss, whatever it is. So yeah, we create products to help them, physical products to help them to do that with their physical health. So we've got ice baths, massage guns, launching saunas very soon.
Yes, the sauna is very exciting, and I'm glad to hear that it's not all surrounding sports rehabilitation, because I don't do any sports. and I still love a sauna, and I love an ice bath
Exactly.
too. So that's an interesting change that you've made.
Yeah.
And out of interest, what was the driving force behind that, or was it as simple as expanding your market share?
Actually, it was about getting a better understanding of our consumer, and also launching products that maybe were targeted at the original audience, but had appeal to other audiences that ended up becoming our customers almost by accident. Okay. So if you think about some of our early products, the massage gun, particularly the compression trousers, the compression trousers are very targeted to sports recovery. That's really what they're about. They're not a mainstream product. And that was great at the beginning because we were tiny and that market is smaller. And as we launched the ice baths and cold water, we started to see this kind of new customer come in. And as we got under the skin a bit more of who they are, they're typically like often senior leaders, they're entrepreneurs themselves. They're people who are chasing high performance, but not necessarily always in terms of athleticism, just in terms of like being their best self. Yeah. And they're really interested in wellness. They wear a Whoop or they've got an Aura ring on. Again, not an athlete. And so once we started to really understand that consumer, and it's also very aligned to who we all are as people, it made a lot of sense to chase that.
Is one of the interesting things that some of the stuff I've picked up from you since we arrived is that MyoMaster and you and your team, you seem to understand the consumer very well. But I'm curious to know, because other business leaders or product owners will be listening, and they might not know their market quite so well, their consumer as well as you do. Could you give us a little bit of insight into how you've learned about your consumers?
Yeah, I think your point's really interesting about whether as a founder you have to be your customer And I actually, at the beginning, it was one of the things I struggled with because we sold these sports recovery products. Joe, my co-founder, at the time was an elite athlete. So he had a deep understanding of that in a way that I didn't. And what I brought to the table was a deep understanding of business. And I've since spent time with a lot of different founders, and there's no right way. I went to the US recently, spent time with the guys who started Obvi. It's a $70 million supplement company. They are 3 middle-aged, quite unfit guys. They'll admit it themselves.
Yeah.
And they sell female supplements.
Right.
So they don't know that they are not their customer in any sense of the word. They wouldn't buy their own products, but they are amazing at listening to their customers. They're amazing at it. And they're also amazing at using their best customers to feed back to them. They built great relationships with them. They have a deep understanding of their consumer, but they aren't their consumer. So I think it's a kind of misconception that you have to be the person that you're selling to. And for us, the way we do it is, honestly, for the first 3 years of running this business, Ed, myself and Joe were out at races or at events where our target customer was basically every single weekend. Every weekend we were going out and having real conversations with them, understanding what their problems were. And we took all of that information back and put it into all of our ads, into all of our messaging. Like, we deeply understood their pain points and why they would or wouldn't buy our products.
Right.
And we used all of that knowledge to put it into our marketing, our landing pages, everything we create, basically.
And what kind of events were these that you and Ed were going to?
So we would either be at trade shows, we'd be at the National Running Show, we'd be at events literally we'd set up a recovery hub at the end of a triathlon, and we would
cool.
all the racers would come and sit in our legs for 10 minutes and we'd chat to them, and it was like the best customer research you could ever do. And they'd be like, well, I do race triathlons every weekend, but I wouldn't buy these because actually, I've tried X competitor, and so I would buy those because I've heard it does X, Y, and Z. So right, we've got to go and adapt the landing page because we're obviously not covering off that pain point, right, when we get back to the office on Monday. So I highly recommend, whether you are your customer or you aren't, just really spending time going out and having face-to-face conversations. I don't think you can put a price on that.
So that was obviously early days when you were dealing with, sort of the elite athlete aspect.
Mm-hmm.
The MyoMaster product range now is, as you say, so much wider.
Yeah.
And the CEO who's wearing his Oura ring might not be doing that triathlon. So how are you now still getting that same customer feedback that you've got such a wider demographic of customer? So
we have people spend quite a lot of money on our products. That means they communicate much, much more with us. So even though we're a bigger team now and a much bigger business, regularly, probably every day, get a couple of WhatsApp messages from different customers saying, this has happened, I don't like this, da, da, da. Or they'll DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Or when you look on our Facebook ads, right, there are literally hundreds of comments of people having their own conversations, we're not even present, between each other about the things that are going wrong, the things they like, why they bought us over someone else, why they wouldn't buy us and they've chosen a competitor. Like, literally, there's like hundreds of them. This is the best customer research we could ever see. It's amazing. Like, second to going out and speaking to those people face to face, watching their conversations, which we're not a part of, are amazing. And on the forums, Joe, my co-founder, is on the cold water forums every day. Wow. And they're like, I got my chiller. Oh my God, this is, and then someone will comment, oh, I didn't buy that one because X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And so that's all the insight we need. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a clever way to have done. I mean, of course, it's happened through organically by the sounds of things, that you started close to athletes and you were able to refine a product and then expand it outwards. It seems like it would have been a much harder task to undertake if you designed the product with the non-athletes there first.
You're on point with that.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. Sure how you would get into the community. And it's cool to hear that you're learning from the comments. One of our previous guests on the podcast, just to give a shout out to DMR, they opened our eyes as to how companies are now starting to learn from what they call unstructured data, which is the data that appears in your comments and in your kind of social chatter, let's call it, where you're not per se involved, but people are talking about your product.
Yeah.
And there's so much rich information to be captured.
People are free.
Yes.
Ask them a survey, it comes from you. Like, without even being intentional, they're biased in the way that they respond. Or having a conversation with me at a race. Yes. It's great, but they're talking to the founder, so it will skew their responses. But when people are freely chatting between themselves, I think that's probably, I'm going to borrow that unstructured data thing. It's a more articulate way of saying it than I have. But like, really a rich source of unstructured data. It's really,
absolutely. And I think it's how consumers communicate now.
For sure,
that's really important. So just while we're talking about products and the product growth, the sauna's next.
Yeah.
When's the sauna released, so to speak? When can people purchase V1? Can I call it that?
So the way we approach product development now is always thinking about categories that make sense for our existing consumer. So we have sold a lot of ice baths, a lot of chillers. We've got a lot of cold water fans amongst our consumer base, and we know that the way they will really benefit is from doing hot and cold therapy. So we want to build out the hot and cold category before we move on to anything else.
Great.
And so that was kind of the thinking behind the saunas. And we're launching in mid to end of September. And we'll launch with 2 different products. And we always try to do that. If you look at our ice bath range, you've got a couple of different products. One of the reasons for that is that if you haven't tried the protocol very much, you often don't want to part with a lot of cash up front. It's a big ask. So we'll always launch something that's a bit more entry level, and then something if you're familiar with the protocol, or if you have more disposable income, you can go in at a higher entry level. So there'll be 2 different products in the category, one that's more of an entry level sauna and one that's more kind of sophisticated, I guess.
Nice.
When you started, you and Joe, obviously Joe was an elite athlete, so I assume when he was playing rugby, they were using ice baths and saunas.
Yeah.
But I think traditionally the benefits of those protocols was to kind of do with muscle recovery. But now, you know, in the last few years, there's been a boom because, as you say, you don't have to just be an elite athlete, because the benefits are now they have, you know, the
So
mental
wide-reaching.
clarity and the way you feel and your energy levels. And so was that news to you guys as well? You know, or was that something that Joe knew all those years ago?
Yeah, I think Joe, let me think about this. So when he started his career 16, 17 years ago, they didn't even do recovery. Like, it wasn't a thing. In fact, he like kind of jokes that like he was playing at the top level of a sport and would stretch for like 5 minutes. That was it. It was literally it. And over time, like, education evolves. And what happens is it starts at the elite level and then it filters down into the mainstream. And so what was really useful about Joe was whatever was happening, he was kind of 3, 4, 5 years ahead of everyone else, because he was there. Obviously, you know, the people they work with are reading research papers and they're seeing the latest science that's being developed. So he knew about it and still knows about it because he's still a coach and in professional environments, quicker and ahead of the curve. But the thing for us is we're not a big enough company to educate the market. And so we're really trying to be tapped into when those trends start to filter down. And at that moment, we'll jump on the trend from a product perspective, because we don't have $100 million marketing budget. So we can't go and tell the world, this is why you should do saunas. We have to wait for the world to start understanding the research from Huberman or whoever it is that's putting content out there. And then we're like, okay, people are going to need this product. They start to understand the benefits of it. That's when we're going to jump on the train and develop something we think is right for our consumer.
But I actually think it, you know, often it makes sense to not be the educators as well.
For
because
sure.
you obviously have skin in the game. You know, of course, you're going to educate people towards your product. So
That's
people are naturally going to be like, well, but if it's coming from a Huberman or a Joe Rogan, you know, it's got that third party authenticity. And then you can say, well, we can actually accommodate now for you based off the education.
That's so right. And I think that's a really valid point, because it allows us to be, in a way, unbiased. Like, we're not trying to educate you about something that's right because we want it to be right. Like, we're hoping that you understand, or you have educated yourself, and then you have a demand for us to create something that could allow you to do the protocol. So yeah, it's important. And I think there are a lot of brands out there who are maybe creating products ahead of the curve, and it means they're developing a narrative which isn't necessarily always right. Like we always say, you might not be an ice bather. Like, not everyone is an ice bather. A lot of people don't like it. Like, a lot of people prefer breath work over ice bath. So, like, find your thing.
I'm not nice.
I love the ice bath.
I've tried.
Right?
Of course, loves them.
We'll try to never be the people that are like, you have to ice bath. It's like, it might just not be part of your wellness routine. It might not make you feel good.
But, you know, I could see doing one with a sauna. You see, by the side. And I'm so thrilled about the hot and cold thing being the package that you attack, because I need the hot after the cold.
Right. And this is all about, like, I think wellness and health is so personal. Like there is no like this thing is right for everybody and this thing is right, apart from the basic principles of like eat well and move your body. But the way that you do those things, all of these things are super personal.
Yeah.
So I think it's important ultimately for us, we want to be the people that can give you a breadth of stuff and we will help guide you through the process of finding what's right for you.
Yeah.
But never the people that are like, do ice baths because you should be doing them, join the cult.
But I
You know
think,
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's funny because we used to do.
That's your cult.
In the I'm very cold, and I'm a CrossFit cold water
Right,
guy.
and that's your vibe.
I'm
Great.
coated in. Yeah, I'm
Perfect.
done. But it's funny because when we first started the podcast, our first couple of episodes, we had like a quick fire round question, and one of the questions was sauna or ice bath. And we'd ask our guests like, which one would you prefer? And we had an interesting debate about it, basically because I think at a certain point they're both horrific. You know, a sauna when you first get into it is like heaven. Like 0 to 5 minutes, you're like, oh my god, this is luxury.
Yeah.
5 to 10, you're like, I'm actually struggling.
Yeah.
And 10 to 15 is like, oh my god, I'm dying.
If you may, I can't make it that far.
And it's like, and for me, it's the slow, painful journey versus the ice bath. Like it's horrific
when
for
you get
30
in,
seconds, but
for
then,
sure.
then it's chill.
Yeah, that's
you know?
so right. Well, I don't know about that, but it definitely
But
gets
it's-
easier the longer you stay in it. Yeah, for sure.
I always figured it was quite an interesting outlook on life. You know, struggle first and then get easier, or ease into the struggle.
Almost this is the like find your heart, right?
Yeah.
It's like find the thing that you really
You
find
can
hard.
handle.
Yeah, you can handle, exactly.
What is yours? I'm going to bring back the quick fire for one time only.
I'm a sauna girl all day long.
Are you really?
Yeah, like all day long. I'd rather like endure than have
me
that first 30 seconds is just
Yeah, it's an assault.
yeah. But when you get out, I
Yeah.
feel like when I get out of the sauna, I'm like, oh.
Yes.
When I get out of the ice bath, I'm like, yeah.
It's crazy. I remember the first time I did it. You know, you get out and it's like your body is completely red. It's like red for ages. It's almost like you have goosebumps for hours. But the mental clarity and the energy levels
Energy for me is like insane.
It's like a drug. You know,
Yeah.
honestly, the way you feel.
It is, and there's a lot of data behind that.
Yeah.
And you were saying, did I hear correctly that your ice bath is chilled? Did I?
Well, so we sell a chiller. We created a chiller to
Right.
go that's compatible with any ice bath. So Joe developed the product. He actually took it from a product they use for fish tanks.
Oh, right.
And he was like trying to find a thing that he could create because he is the ultimate ice bath user. He ice baths every single day. And he was getting so frustrated. Like the product we create is great, but in heat like this, of course, it's going to struggle to keep the water cool.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to create something that was like relatively accessible from a price point where you could control the temperature. Because also another thing about doing it your way, people love to do it. Some people love to do it at 7 degrees. Some people want it at 1.
Yeah.
And so he found a product they were using for fish tanks, and he redesigned it and adapted it to create it for ice baths. And so now you can tailor the temperature.
Wow. And I love that it's compatible with all of them. I think that's such a smart move because, you know, I have a Lumi, you know, and I wouldn't.
Get out.
Yeah, don't worry, it's collecting mold under my desk in the garden, so don't worry about it. But the fact that the MyoChill works on all of them and the price point is, I've seen the levels now, the levels of every chilled ice bath has honestly dropped by a third. And it's because of you, I'm convinced. It has to be.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of back to the flywheel point we were talking about. Like, we really understand our consumer and we want to be a brand that is standing in 20 years' time. So it's not in our interest to like be creating things that only a few people can afford because otherwise there's no longevity to what we're trying to do. And also, like, it does come back to the fact of like understanding who your consumer is and also kind of being them a little bit. Like, we know what we would part with and we're not going to spend $3,000 on it. We just don't have that kind of money, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to also talk about the business because I've been looking on your LinkedIn, and you know, if anyone doesn't follow you already on LinkedIn, they should, because you give some great insights
should
there.
follow
You
you.
definitely should.
And you know, you've said some really interesting things. And the company is how old now? Would you say
It's like 3.5 years officially.
3.5 years? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So a few things stood out from memory that I just wanted to kind of raise with you and see if I could find out the story behind it. One of the things you'd said was that caught my eye was, don't work with agencies larger than you. Don't work with partners who are like too much bigger than you as a company. And it really struck a chord for me because I was like, oh yeah, that's interesting, because all of our favorite partnerships happen with companies of a kind of similar stage in their life cycle.
Mhm.
And I wondered if you could just kind of give some of the experience behind perhaps partnering with companies much larger than MyoMaster in your early days.
Yeah,
if that
in the
happened.
early days, I was obviously watching a lot of brands and getting inspiration from them. And if they would work with an agency, I would think, oh, well, it's got a stamp of approval from that brand. They must be amazing. But the reality is, if you go to a big agency, you're a small fish in a big pond. And so it is really hard for them to give you enough time and energy, and it's hard for you to have a budget that is going to be significant to them. And also it's hard for them to understand your challenges if they're working with a lot of bigger brands, because the challenges are just so different. And so Ed and I Ed's our head of growth, who have really gone through the mill with agencies, especially in the first 2 years. We got it wrong a lot. And now what we found is the people who are also on their startup journey, typically, and are kind of 2, 3, 4 years old as an agency, the fit is just so much better. They have more time for us. They have more empathy for the challenges. They understand the challenges. They're typically working with other businesses who are at a similar stage. They can bring across a lot of learnings to us, and they just care more.
Yeah. And are these marketing agencies you're describing?
Typically, yeah. So like email, Google, paid.
Okay, cool.
Creative.
And then on the other side of the business, kind of like the manufacturing and the design and that kind of stuff, is that an ethos you carry through to there, or do you work with much larger is that not something you have an option over, let's say?
Well, we do all our designing in-house.
Oh, wow,
so
cool.
I mean, it's much less sophisticated than it sounds. Joe literally will scribble the idea. Yeah. He'll write the steps of what he's thinking about, and then he'll speak to our manufacturers and
I think I saw
create it. He literally uses scribbles that.
Yes.
How he does it. And he's not a product designer, but he's the customer. So he knows what he would want it to be and how he would want it to work. And he's also he's a trained carpenter now. He's just a super handy person. His dad was an engineer, and he's interested in all of that. So he thinks about the mechanics of it, but he couldn't bring it to life in a CAD design, for instance. So we have great relationships with our manufacturers, and they'll be send back a design and be what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And then we'll get the prototype. We've got the sauna over there. We'll all test it for 6 months and be this is shit. We need to change this. I'd prefer it if it was like this. And that's how we do it.
Right. Okay, cool. And so that leads me to another thing you'd mentioned on your LinkedIn, which I thought was an interesting one, especially for people who sell products like you do, was not to overstock, because that could obviously be catastrophic to a business early on. And I don't suppose that, although the price point for your products is accessible, I imagine that stock cost is pretty substantial. For 20 saunas or 200 saunas, it's a lot of money. At the same time, the product I'm not sure how long it takes to create the product from start to finish, but it leaves you in a tricky balance of keeping enough stock to deliver quickly while not overdoing it.
Probably the single hardest thing about our business,
Right.
And probably any product business, but particularly if you're creating high expensive products, right? Yeah, you're right. That cash outlay for us is really tough. So right now we're at a big crunch point because we're ordering for Q4, which is our busiest time of the year, and it will be our biggest Q4, 5x bigger than it was last year. So finding the cash for that is really difficult.
Right.
And especially it's easier for us now because we're a bigger business. So people will lend us money. We can get access to debt. Manufacturers are more generous because we've got a track record. But when you first start out, it's really, really tough. I think it's always better. We're a company that will go out of stock over overstocking, because you can't get that money back.
Yeah.
Right.
If it's tied up, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And I think in these early stages, managing money and cash is just it's the thing that kills you. That will be the killer of your business.
Do you utilize pre-ordering? Is that something that you offer?
So the challenge for us is that we have to ship most of our products because they're heavy, and the timelines of delivery fluctuate. So if there's a lot of freight that comes into, it's going to take a lot longer to process your products.
Right.
So the challenge we have with pre-orders is we can't guarantee the delivery date always. Right. So that's really difficult for us, and that makes for a bad customer. That
would be an issue for customers because I always think it's one of the most genius sales marketing ever done was, did you see what Kanye West did at the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
So with the $20 for everything, and everything was pre-order, and it basically took 4 months to arrive.
Yeah.
But he used the sales to then get it produced, and so he basically paid it all off with the money he'd made.
I think Kanye West is in a privileged position.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't. It's not. I think like with fashion and clothes, it's different because you're creating something that is totally unique with a brand or a design that's totally unique. With a logo and a brand on it that is like it tells you. It's just not the same with physical products. Like you might love our brand and you might love our sauna, but the bottom line is you can buy it from sauna somewhere else.
If you need
and if
it
you have to
now-
wait for 4 months, you're going to just buy one from somewhere else.
Yeah,
Even
it's
if
very
it's
true.
a bit more expensive, it's just not the same thing. And it's an interesting point because I think, this comes back to like really understanding your flywheel and what you're doing, because it's easy for me to, I often look at like, a Gymshark and a Tala and would take so many lessons from what they were doing, but fundamentally our business is just totally different. It just is a completely different thing. So the way that we have to execute is just different.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's, I'm so guilty if I go on Amazon, if it doesn't come tomorrow, I'm not going to buy it.
Right.
I've just picked the best one of the one that's going to come tomorrow.
Right.
And so, if your customer is like, well, I would like my ice bath or sauna now.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right. They're not going to wait 6 months. They want it in a couple
And
of
I
weeks.
think we sit somewhere in between the kind of Kanye West thing and the Amazon thing, because it's an expensive product. You consider it. People come to our site 4, 5, 6 times. They'll follow the journey. They'll think about it for a long time. You don't part with 500 quid or £1,000 like quickly. But so I think we sit somewhere in between that, which is to say that like we have some goodwill. People want to shop with us and they will wait for a time.
Yes.
But we haven't got Kanye West kind of equity.
You just got to strike that balance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's a really interesting way.
One of the things I wanted to raise as well was that, in our research before we arrived, I wanted to just find out how else you had managed to capture the market. And I saw, of course, your partnerships with people like Wimbledon and some kind of elite sporting events where you were helping in a kind of official basis. And I'm not a sportsman, as I said already, right?
You made that clear.
So whenever I do stretch, which doesn't happen particularly often, but let's say I do, I stretch in the same way I stretched in year 10, year 11 at secondary school. And I'm going somewhere with this, which is that, do you think that now that these products that provide, cold plunge and sauna are more accessible from a price point, that we'll see them in schools? Because my mind's in sports club mentality and stuff like that, that when I was growing up, we never had an ice plunge after sports club, but there would be, a queue of us to get into a ice plunge after school. And those kind of habits stick with you as you grow older.
Yeah, I think you'll see them filtering down to sports clubs. I think they are incorporating them in private schools. But then I wouldn't expect to see them in kind of local schools. And I would be cross if that's what they were spending money on, to be honest. As much as I want to sell, as much as I want to sell my product, I think this is a totally different conversation. But just to say that I think there's much bigger issues for schools, things to be spending money on. I really do. I think I actually would be outraged if they were buying kids ice baths.
Yes.
Get the kids doing some sport. Let's just start there.
Okay.
Just get your kids moving, That's the first thing.
No, that's something you're obviously passionate about. A conversation for a different day.
Oh, I'm super. I just was actually saying to Simi about how I've got this secondary business idea, which I keep thinking about, which is creating like after school and Saturday school for 7 to 16-year-olds, which is like the actual education you should be getting. So it's like, how do I manage my money? How do I get a mortgage? How do I start a business? Like, how do I do meditation and visualization so my dreams can come true? Whatever. Anyway, that's
as opposed to
next time when I start that, we can do another pod.
And the thing is, you are a consumer of those products too. I mean, I know you're not.
I am as a mum,
but you're attending. I mean, I don't know if you could just talk about that class, because we had a small talk before we sat down in front of the cameras about the program you're doing for LinkedIn marketing.
Yeah,
and I think it was a really useful. What's the name of the chap again?
Chris Donnelly.
Shout
out, Chris. Yeah,
Chris Donnelly. Because we'll check that out as well, and your LinkedIn engagement is nuts. So you're doing it.
It's
right.
not because of Chris, by the way. This is
No, indeed.
Sorry, Chris. Your course is great and everything, but like this is a lot pre-Chris. But the point is that again, everything I've done in this business journey, and even I had a career, a big career before I started this business. Like I knew nothing. Like my level of education was like -10. And I'm just like thinking, how many opportunities there are for entrepreneurship, people to start their own thing, and how little education there is about it.
Do you not
like,
think
kind
it's
of
part
just
of the
doesn't make
fun
any
though?
sense.
Do you not think those like first 6 months to a year of being a founder of a company, that steep learning curve is quite exciting?
I like when I look back on it, it was so, we're in a better place now. But
Yeah.
honestly, 3 years of like pure pain. I told you about our really crappy office. We were constantly like running out of cash. I didn't know where the next money was going to come from. I worked 7 days a week, pretty much. We were at events every weekend. We just have to come back on a Monday. Ed was like, is our ride or die. He did it all with us. Like, it was just so tough. And like, when I look back on it, a lot of those challenges could have been like, some of the lessons weren't that hard. I just didn't know. So like, there's definitely an element of like, yeah, the good old days, definitely. But also like, I didn't need to wade through that much shit.
Yeah.
Speaking
about the stuff you're doing with Chris Donnelly,
he's going to love this.
Yeah. Your personal brand is growing exponentially. And I was wondering, do you find that hard to manage the personal brand with obviously then dealing with MyoMaster's growth as well? Or are two nicely intertwined?
Oh, it's a really tough one on my mind pretty much every day as I put a bit of time into the personal brand, and I feel really guilty for like not doing sometimes MyoMaster stuff to do the personal brand stuff. But I think I've given pretty much every day of the week to this business for 4 years, like nonstop. And so I sort of feel like you're allowed to do some other things. It's important for me, like mentally, creatively. Secondly, MyoMaster's always my priority. So like if I have to not do the personal brand stuff, which sometimes I don't, Chris is always like, you're inconsistent. And I'm like, yeah, that's because sometimes MyoMaster stuff just will be my priority. And thirdly, what I'm really learning, which helps to appease the guilt, is that one feeds the other. Like it really does. Like the people who are building great founder brands, and one of the things Chris says is like he's never had to use a recruiter because people just want to work for him. So because he has a great brand, so he'll put about a post like they're hiring someone, he'll get thousands of candidates. The second thing is he never has to worry about raising money, which we do at MyoMaster, because he'll say, I want to raise money, and everyone will be like, oh, we know you, we trust you, you sound great. Even if he's not, like he's putting out great content, and people will just they'll just give him money, they'll invest in him super easy. And the third thing is the people that you talk to on LinkedIn actually are our target customers. They are the high performers who, care about their wellness. And we talk about MyoMaster. That's what I talk about, how I'm building this business.
Yes, of course.
So it's really a top of funnel traffic source for MyoMaster. And I was talking earlier about how we're amazing at paid, and a big focus for us over the next 12 months is driving more organic traffic, building our community. We're a founder-led brand. So it makes sense for us to do that.
And you're finding that you're actually selling the product with your paid advertising on LinkedIn?
We don't do paid on LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. Interesting.
They're different traffic sources.
And I take it you don't do paid on LinkedIn because it's kind of perceived as the wrong type of audience per se, or business?
No, I just don't.
Well, I suppose a personal brand's a nice way to enter that territory.
I just think you can do. I guess what it is that like to build a personal brand on Facebook would be like impossible. And in fact, all of our ads are founder, well, not all of them, but most of our ads are founder-led brands anyway. So it's the same kind of content, just created for a different format and put budget behind it, because that's the way that works. LinkedIn is more of an organic platform. It just is. So it's the same thing. It's just doing it in a way that is appropriate for each platform, I guess.
Yes. Okay. And then with regards to raising money, because it's not easy, is it? Raising money. And you had a great public event raising money where you raised money on the stage of Dragon's Den. Yeah. I don't know if you're kind of willing to give us the juicy goss about what happens behind the scenes on Dragon's Den, but we were talking on the car on the way over. You of course secured investment from two of them. Yeah. And we were curious if you'd indulge us. What's the kind of due diligence and process after the cameras turn off?
Honestly, like before we did that, we'd probably raise like 750 to $1 million. Not a huge amount of money in the scheme of raising money, but we'd done a couple of rounds with some impressive investors. And the due diligence process is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Like, I understand that the BBC have got to protect their reputation. Yeah. They don't want to invest in charlatans, but there are quicker ways to find out. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
And this is post or pre?
Both.
Really?
Yeah.
So even post, once you've had the pre and you've got the agreement on camera, so to speak. It's not a slam dunk. And did it end up following through? Did they invest?
I guess what I will say is that Gary and Sara have been amazing at helping us, like super cool.
Okay, great, fantastic. And do you think you'll have to, I know now you have funding for your products, for example, Q4 coming up, it's easier for you to access funding. Do you think MyoMaster is going to do more rounds?
So we are going to kick off a fundraise in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be raising till the end of the year. So if anyone's listening, hit me up.
Okay, and that's a
great opportunity.
That's
We're
a private
growing
round, not
5x. Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be angel investors for sure.
Angel investors. And do you ever think about the seed investment platforms?
As in crowdfunding?
Sorry, crowdfunding, not seed. I think
I've seen
seeders.
people do it really well. Like, spent some time with Dan Morissette, who owns Heights. They raised a lot of money on crowdfunding, was super successful for them. For me, it's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. And it's like running an entire marketing campaign. It's very visible. Like, if it doesn't go well, that's also, not good for your reputation. I think it would go well for us post Dragon's Den and post the kind of, people have kind of fallen in love with the story a bit. I think it would go well, but it would probably be quicker and easier for us to raise from angels. Also, you have the situation where you end up with 1,000 more people on your cap table who all have the right to ask you questions whenever they want. And so the ongoing process is very time consuming.
Some national newspapers coined you after Dragon's Den as the most impressive contestant that had ever been on it.
I'll take that.
The
visualization worked.
How do you feel about the process and your performance on it? And does that sort of mean a lot to you?
I think it's funny because I've been sort of coaching a couple of the candidates who have just filmed this series.
Oh,
it's
right.
the one that will come out next year. And the thing I always say to people is, like, you have to remember, I was at M&T Saatchi, right? Like, I pitched every day to cold pitches to people. Like, I'm just a pitcher. I've always done that for 10 years. So I had that experience. So, anyone sort of looking at you is like, I got so many messages from people being like, how did you get that good at presenting? How do I build my confidence?
Yeah.
All of these things. And I'm like, guys, I've been doing this for 10 years. And so there's that. And then secondly, I think it's a really, it's a TV show. And it's like, you should think of it like the X Factor for business, because they will take what you did and they will edit it however they decide.
Right.
And so generally it went well. So I don't think they could have made us look really bad. But of course they could have mashed it together in a way that, take how they made Steven look in the clip, which is that he kind of looked a little stupid. And actually in the room, he was so supportive. He was so kind. He was hyping me up every step of the way. And that isn't really the impression that you get from the clip. So that's...
It did seem a bit disjointed because obviously the interaction you had with him, he did look a bit stupefied, and he
did it in the moment, but it was like 30 seconds.
He was
we
very
filmed for 3 hours.
supportive.
I don't have enough. Honestly, I went in there not really being a Steven Bartlett fan, to be honest.
Really,
and I came out of it being his ultimate hype girl. Like, I think the guy's a really nice person, and he was really kind to me.
Yeah, he was giving you a good old clap when it seemed like
he was
put
honest.
Tuka
He
in
did
his
that,
place.
but he did that for 3 hours. He was like, "This girl, oh my god, she's a man! Oh my god, guys!" And that's how he was going
That's
for me.
amazing.
Like, and then I was crying. I cried a lot more than they showed on the thing. And he was like, he was honestly so kind, like exceptionally.
Did you say 3 hours?
Yeah, we filmed for 3 hours. That's
filmed for
another
3
thing.
hours?
3 hours of content.
Are there breaks?
10 minutes,
Is it-
no breaks.
No, you're on your feet for 3 hours.
Yeah.
No way.
Don't move off the spot. They don't stop filming. They're not like you just get grilled for 3 hours.
Wait, so Tuka's sitting through
I know.
multiple 3 hour pitches?
I know. And actually, when we filmed, we got there at like 7 a.m. and we didn't go in to film until 8 o'clock at night. And they were kind of fed up. Like, the Dragons were fed up. And they were grilling us. And honestly, I'm not joking you. Like, they grilled us consistently for 3 hours. So I'm like, it was impressive that I stood there for 10 minutes, but it was really impressive that I stood there for 3 hours and took this shit.
Yeah.
Because they just said the same fucking thing. Like, it's shit. It's a shit idea. It's a shit product. Like, whatever. For 3 hours. And so it's definitely harder than you think.
That's
it comes across. Yeah.
blown my mind. Also, what's funny is they do 3 hours of recording for each pitch, and then the only questions they show are, and your revenue for the last 2 years, please.
Yeah, it makes it look very
about
much
3
like a
different
bank
questions.
loan, because
it's not far off.
It seems very much just like, well, if you haven't made this much now, then you'll never make money then.
Which is like so untrue.
That's like not.
It's just not real.
Yeah.
Which is my point about being a program. Like I've done a lot. I've pitched over 200 times, like in real life, to investors, and been rejected 98% of the times. And that was not a real example of an investment pitch. It's just not the reality.
And with those 200 pitches behind you, which is nuts, especially considering the short time frame, what would stand out as being advice you might pass on to a founder in your position 2 years ago who's about to begin their first few pitches to investors?
Just keep going up.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Just keep going. Like it's, no one finds raising money easy unless you've already had an amazing exit and you already have that kind of network, which I don't. And it's especially hard. Like, it's much harder if you look like me, female, mixed race, bad person to raise money.
How was your personal journey into that? Did you have any mentors? How did you navigate your way?
I didn't have a mentor, but we did when we did our first raise. Joe and I both don't come from like wealthy backgrounds. We just don't have that kind of, or at least we didn't. We do now because we've met a lot of people along the way. And so we went to my former boss, who I actually just talked about a lot on LinkedIn, and his former boss. And we asked them. They were the only people we knew who were rich.
Yeah,
So
right.
we were like,
Yeah.
do you have got any money? Do you want to invest in us?
Yeah.
And we both had good careers and were good employees. And they were
Yeah.
like, oh, we'll back you. And I think people kind of can sometimes overcomplicate it. I'm like, literally ask anyone. Like, ask your former boss, ask your neighbor. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Just be like, I'm doing this thing. And really, they're like, do I back you or don't I? Really, that's what it comes down to. And for us, those first few rounds were really like those two. And then those two would introduce us to some people who would introduce us to some people who would introduce us to some people. Like everyone on my cap table is like 3 degrees of separation, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it is if you're like starting really cold, like we were. Like you just have to be like, okay, do you know anyone? I would literally be like, think about anyone you can think of who's got any money.
Yeah. Did you take was there any sense of validation when these people had decided that they would invest in you? Was it like a little bit of a weight off your back? Like maybe we're not just crazy, like someone else believes that us and or this product can go somewhere.
It wasn't valid. It was relief for sure, because like in those early days we would have died. We put all of our personal savings in. We had nothing left basically, so it would have died. And like I said, we don't have parents or anyone we can be like, can you just loan us the money? Like they don't have that kind of money. So it was relief, but it wasn't validation, and it still never will be, because like the thing about taking money and the thing about waking up every day, and I think we're quite good at this here, is like we're just scratching the surface. Like there's so much more to do. Like every day we come in and I'm like, we're all like, Ed, actually I said to Ed, our head of growth the other day, we hit our target for the month, like a couple of days before the month ended. And I was like, oh, you can chill. And I was like, I can't chill. Like, fucking trying to hit this massive target for this year. Then we're trying to hit this massive target for next year. Trying to launch this and do this and change this. And that's startup mentality. Like there's never, honestly, ever a moment where you're like,
yeah,
it's just like next thing.
Feet up.
Honestly, even when Dragon's Den obviously blew out, it was amazing. We were like, oh my God, like everything's broken. Like we need a new warehouse. We need warehouse staff. We're going to let down our customers. Oh my God, we need to hire. It was just like more, so.
And are you hiring at the moment?
Yeah, we're going to hire 2 more people in the next sort of 6 months. We're a super lean team, pretty much like 1.5 million pound ahead in terms of like revenue to person.
Wow.
Full-time employee. And I'd like to keep it that way, because I think you can easily get inflated when you have a bit of success.
Yeah. And are you managing that by partnering with agencies and outsourcing companies to manage the kind of peripherals?
So we keep in-house, we don't have a 3PL, which is rare for a consumer product business. We keep in-house all of our warehousing and shipping, because we have big products. It doesn't really make sense to do the 3PL thing. We keep in-house all our customer service, kind of growth, content creation, and then we outsource a little bit of accounting, the agency who like organizes the Facebook ads and Google. It's pretty much.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're actually just a lean team altogether, really,
Yeah.
even including the augmented workforce.
Yeah.
Cool. Back when you were on the Den, you mentioned something about integrating your products with technology.
Yeah.
Is that something that's still happening, or is that just something that you decided was actually unnecessary?
The biggest lesson I've learned about this whole thing in this whole journey is like focus is your friend. And moving from, it was true, everything we said was true at the time, but we started to develop, because we filmed that like March last year. And so we started to go on the journey of developing the app and thinking about it and how it would work. And when we started to get into it, we were like, this is an entirely different business. And hang on a second, it's an entirely different skill set that I don't have, because I just spent 3 years building a product business.
Yeah.
And it would kind of be like flushing all my skills that I've just learned, and all of us have learned, flushing them down the toilet and being like, right, I'm just going to throw all that away and start again with something I know absolutely nothing about.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to scale the product business, and we've got a really clear idea of how we want to do that. Not necessarily the specific products, but like the categories we want to go into and how we want to do it. And then we're going to bring a piece of software out that'll be, I guess, much less sophisticated than the one we talked about. And instead it will just like guide you through the protocols for the products that you have. So you can you'll be able to go on there, record your sauna time, maybe start your sauna from the comfort of your home, and then maybe go into some kind of community where you can chat with other people who do the same thing, essentially.
That seems great. That seems like something that would actually add to the experience.
It adds to the existing experience of the products rather than like trying to create a whole new piece of software.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Which is really hard.
Yeah. It's a big play. An interesting one, but presumably as well, your brand then has the option to incorporate that later on, should the opportunity arise where you feel like it's strategic to do so.
Exactly. And also, like, we're still so small. Like, we are like delighted to be a multi-million-pound company now, and we're growing really fast, but like in the grand scheme of things, we're tiny. So there's just so much more opportunity with what we're doing and taking the learnings from what we've done to keep scaling, rather than like being like, okay guys, we're doing quite well, let's just fuck it all up and go and try and do something else. Why?
Are you, in terms of scaling, do you only sell into the UK, or are you looking at wider markets, or how does that work?
So we did, we are predominantly UK. We did open up to Europe and the US, got a lot of interest from the US, and then realized it's a logistical nightmare for us, because like we sell hardware products. Sometimes they go wrong, they need to come back, they need to get fixed or replaced. And until we're in a place where we can manage that logistically, it doesn't make sense for us. It's definitely on the radar though, and one of the reasons why we're going to be raising to the end of this year.
What is the market doing with these products at the moment? Obviously, I imagine there was a big boom post-COVID. Now that things seem to be a bit more normal in that sense, what are you finding with the trends? Are more new people coming into this space, or is it existing customers re-upping their setup? What does it look like at the moment?
It's booming. Don't enter the market though, because it's already very busy. There's no space for you. But if you're already in it, like it's going crazy. Like think about the rise of everything wellness. Like think about how many wellness companies are emerging. Think about how much access we have to personal data in a way that we never had before. And I think that drives a lot of it. Like I talked about Whoop and Aura as examples earlier on, but like you can wear a ring on your finger that gives you access to data that you could never have imagined having about yourself even like 4 or 5 years ago. And that trend is only going to continue. And I think people are only going to become more obsessed with longevity, how they feel every day. And almost there's this kind of big disparity opening up, I think, in the Western world between essentially people who are really unhealthy and then people who are really, really interested in their health and wellness and how they can hack their habits and their life in order to stay alive and feel good for as long as possible.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much opportunity. And if you look at the trends in the States, like it is wild. Even looking at the data around sauna and ice bath, places to go. People going, they're popping up everywhere. It's one of the fastest growing franchises in the US. Yeah. So that's another exciting thing for us, is thinking about, because they're always like, a couple of years ahead of us, is thinking about, do we want to do a physical space? Like, would we do something that's like, well, we put the products into a space where you can come and have an experience? Like, this is so exciting.
I've got this little vision, I think, that's going to happen where, corporate companies, a large enterprise and SME, they're starting to capture personal health data of their employees, right?
Right.
And it doesn't take too much to imagine that if a company understands the health of their employees,
Yeah.
they can see productivity going up and down depending on their health,
Right.
and make all sorts of interesting predictions, that suddenly health and wellness becomes like a KPI for a corporate company or an SME to start to prioritize, alongside like having a fancy office or cool car parking spaces. And that's going to be really interesting, because when I was like in my early 20s and, you work in all the, I'm not going to name drop, but like different companies here, there and everywhere, a monthly target reward for the sales floor is like, let's go to Mayfair and get on the bag.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
it's like, well, okay, great. Like, that's fun and all that kind of stuff. But
Times
then,
are changing. for
yeah,
sure,
and the following Monday is not very productive.
Right.
And that's not particularly good for the employee, and it's not
Yeah.
particularly good for the company either.
Right.
But
That
the
sector
company,
will probably be the last one to catch up.
yeah, right. Yeah. But the company, they just don't understand yet, because the data hasn't been available and people haven't been using things like this. But as we look at our hiring journey, and I'm sure you're the same considering the product you sell, nowadays understanding someone's professional experience is interesting, but it's also kind of interesting to understand their personal care with regards to health and wellness, because it speaks to their longevity in the business, how hard they can work. Are they going to get burnt out in conditions that aren't burning out everyone else because they're not eating the right kind of diet, and they're not looking after themselves?
Right.
So,
And that's expensive to you as a company, right? Ultimately, like when we get to the hard numbers.
Unbelievably.
And also, what I've noticed is we've got a young team here, and a couple of people like fresh out of uni or just starting their careers. They don't drink,
No, right.
but they're not interested.
Yeah.
And on a Friday afternoon, like a couple of Fridays ago, I worked at big ad agencies. Like, you'd be down the pub by 2:00 and you wouldn't be coming back to the office. Like, that was just how it was.
It's where business was done.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what they always say.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got to go Mayfair. That's where the business is done. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And now they're like, let's go play paddle tennis. Like,
Yeah.
that's what they want to do.
Totally.
It's like a social activity. So, yeah, also, generations kind of desire different things.
Especially, like, the cameras can't see it, but there's a sauna in the corner of your office.
Yeah, it looks great.
And it looks great. And it says an office.
Yeah.
So, maybe
Why
we'll
not?
see,
I guess the thing we need to think about is like, making people making it feel comfortable in it, because we still have that, like, this is the office, right?
Right.
Not here necessarily because it's our product, but
Right, yeah, fair enough. Yes,
Yeah.
of course. And it's got a glass fronted door.
yeah, exactly. Like, who wants to sit in there?
I
in
see
a
some
bucket? Like,
I see some issues arising.
yeah.
Cool. Right, yeah.
It's true.
With that in mind, so obviously you've had events and partnerships with places like Wimbledon. Are you finding any of those arising in large corporate offices?
Like a couple of people have approached us, and they're not really large corporates. They're more actually like, I was talking to the guys at Moju about it.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
little ginger
factories.
shops.
Yeah, they're more like, they're not startup. They're a scale up, I guess you would position them, but they're a younger, more like innovative, fresh company. More those kind of companies, but equally, like, we haven't tried. It's not on the radar for us right now. The thing about Wimbledon, which I do just want to put out there, because I keep getting bloody like teams contact me, like, will you do a partnership with us? They pay us.
Right,
to put
yeah.
the recovery hub into there. It's a value add for their
Should hope so.
player
Yeah, of
experience. So, like, we will put our product into places if you pay us, because it is a value add experience. Like, we don't
Totally.
do this for like to promote. Our
No,
product.
of course.
I hope they give you strawberries and cream as well.
Yeah, I know. We didn't get any tickets, sadly. It was
Oh,
a bit of
wow.
a shame. I know.
Oh, no, that's a...
Yeah.
That's a
Anyways,
joke.
we got paid. That's all I care about.
Cool. Okay, Lottie, that's an hour has flown by.
Wow.
And, hopefully we can get a chance to kind of catch up with you again in the future
sure.
and, find out how things have changed, meet your new team members and things like that. I know
We'll
Ed
be
will
in
still
an
be
even
here.
sexier office.
Yeah.
Ed will still be here.
Ed will
He'll
still be
probably
here.
be like,
It'll be grey by then.
Yeah, exactly. And have 4 kids instead of 1. But
Yeah,
other than
yeah,
that,
yeah. But no, honestly, it has been fabulous talking to you, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. And
It's great what
yeah.
you're doing. I think it's super cool. Love
Wicked.
the format and style and everything.